What's going on, everyone? EXO here in beautiful Sarasota, Florida, and we are at Sarasota Powersports. Now, this is my second time making this video because the last time I rode here I had a bug on the camera, so I didn't, y'all wouldn't have been able to see anything. But we're here. Why are we here? Well, we're here dropping off the Busa because we're gonna get the carbon specially fitted. I did it myself, but the thing is though, it needs to be shaved down and drill some holes in it to fit it properly and make sure the bike's safe when I'm riding at high speeds or low speeds even, because you don't want the front end to fall off. But as you can see, basically the topic of today's video is we're gonna go over bikes. One of the biggest questions I get asked is, what bike should I buy? Should I buy a 600? Should I buy a 750? Should I buy a 1000? And the thing is that then what brand should I buy? And that's one of the biggest headaches in the world. And I want to say we're gonna stage this out here because for y'all to understand at home, like even right now we're looking at a CF Moto. Is this a good bike to buy? I know a lot of people are buying these CF Motos. They are really cool, neat bikes. I haven't ridden one. I'm not a fan of their tank design, and this is something I'm going to point out here. And like I said, we're doing this in stages, so take it for what it is. But when you ride your tank, that's something that you're going to want to take into account when you get on a bike. How you're seated on the bike, everything. Another thing is you're going to want to take into account handlebar positioning. Of course, if you're looking at a touring bike, you're going to be more so upright. You're not going to be leaned over, and this is something that I'm going to get into with the bikes, is that when you go from a BMW to a Ducati to a CF Moto to a Honda to a Suzuki, the thing is that all of them fit differently, and they all have different specialty bikes. Another thing that I'm going to point out here is, as you can see, they have a Suzuki GSX 8R, and basically things are changing in the bike life. We're seeing this EV movement, we're seeing the bikes changing design, we're seeing upper handlebars, we're seeing the engine power cut down, the CCs cut down, but the bikes are becoming lighter. So how does that even affect it? And then the whole other 9 yards of this is that you could be like me and have a turbo Busa or H2, and we'll get into that as well too. So yeah, let's go. So, and also my first love, of course, quads, ATVs, also dirt bikes. But that Raptor, oh my goodness, looks so beautiful. But yeah, Sarasota Powersports has a beautiful lineup of stuff, and if you haven't checked them out, be sure to check them out. But let's go inside and see what's on the showroom floor. And as we make our way into the showroom floor, you're greeted by a beautiful ZX6R. I still find this bike to be so unique in appearance, and the best appearance ever, because of, they now made this design into the ZX10s. The ZX10s have the same design. The only difference is you get the winglets like the R1s or an R1M. But the ZX6 is still an amazing bike, and I know there's recalls on them, different years, but still I'm holding my feet to the fire here. I still think this is probably the perfect 600 bike for you to buy. It's just so neatly done. I love how the taillight looks. Now granted, it's not a ZX10, but still at the end of the day, for this body style, I love it. And when they made the ZX10 with the Darth Vader helmet, yeah, they're different, and that's what I love. I love when the manufacturers do different things from the 600 to the 1000, but now you're seeing that the 1000cc bike is looking like the 600. So what does that tell you? Well, maybe it's they're trying to be a financially responsible, and not spend as much money and just keep the same designs in case they don't sell as many. But at the same day, like I said, you can't beat this design of the bike, and it's the beautiful 600. Like I said, back when I got my license, the bike to have was a CBR 1000 or CBR 600. I forget the one. It was white with the gold, and then also the ZX6 too, because ZX6, both of them did the exhaust out the tail. It was so unique. It was the first of its kind. So yeah, that's awesome. But let's get into this. They have a Yamaha R1M, just like mine. This number is 4335, and it's really amazing to see this bike that isn't my own, because one, I actually didn't see the R1M from the dealership when I got it from Wild Wild West in Texas. I didn't see it I only saw it after the fact, after we put on little tidbits. But it's so unique to see. Also to the exhaust, and the other day I actually took off the right side fairing because, as y'all may know, I had an oopsie, dropped it. But you know what? The bike's fine. The parts are replaceable. It's literally all cosmetic, which is great. But to see this thing, and by the way, don't make that mistake of dropping it. I tell you, because the bike itself is what, 27,000 MSRP, and these two pieces cost basically $4,000. Yeah, just the two carbon pieces, the winglet and the fairing. So please do not make that mistake if you have an R1M. And that's also one of the things that I made a point of, is that when we bring these bikes out, it is a real major responsibility, because anything can happen, and that simple drop, it could be just anything, and there's money gone. So remember, when you see these bikes, very unique. But yeah, they have and this is actually, I believe, the 2026 R1M, not the 2025. Now then, next to it we have the H2, was it the ZR, was it ZH2, I think it is. And the thing is about this thing is, I believe they still come with the supercharger, if I remember correctly. But it's more of a touring. This is the thing that I was talking about with getting into the touring bikes versus a super sport bike, is that touring bike, you're going to be more set up straight, you're going to be more comfortable. Realistically speaking, this is ultimately a naked bike, but at the end of the day, realistically, it is a fun, nice, easy bike to ride, comfortable bike. Now, of course, if you're a bigger person, this bike is going to be more friendly to you. If you're not as big or maybe not as tall, then you're not going to want to go with this bike. As you can see, this bike here, definitely a lot different than my H2s. My H2s, they are lower and a lot more power, definitely. But as you can see, all the naked bikes here, Sarasota Powersports has a beautiful lineup, and we'll get to even more stuff. And then right here we have the Suzuki Hayabusa. Now I tell you, had I saw the Suzuki Hayabusa in person before I went out and bought the green one, although I do love the matte green, but I love this white. This white is so unique in appearance, and look how everything is on it. The blue integration. Now, of course, we did the carbon piece. So, even now that I'm telling you and speaking to you about this, I kind of do like the matte green, because in the matte green, these are actually black. So I actually got these in carbon. This I got in carbon. Now, a lot of people don't realize this, is that this and this are all one piece when you take this off. So you're not going to keep that color. So yeah, so if you're thinking about doing a carbon anything with the bike, just remember, if you take these out, this is all going to get taken out. So, but I love this color, and I think if I were to get ever a second Hayabusa, it'd have to be a white one like this. I do love the anniversary color one. I haven't seen one in person yet, but like I said, if I could get a second Busa, this would probably be it. I will say though, I did notice though something, is that on this one they went with blue, but here they went with like a dull blue. Now, if I got this, I would definitely change these into carbon fiber, because it doesn't match. But the matte green one, these are all champagne, except for this is black. And also to remember, the Busas that went to the UK and Europe, the matte green is not offered with the champagne, it's offered with the black, whereas the US spec got the gold with the matte green. And then also to here we have an R9, beautiful R9. Now, for me personally, this is actually a good way to explain both of these bikes. A lot of things are going on right now. We are having emissions come down on us to this day, taking our rights away, really. And what does that mean? Well, that means that manufacturers can't produce high, desired vehicles that we would love to have. They are tampering back the power, but they're making the bikes lighter. So we're seeing that with emissions, but we're also seeing that with MotoGP, because MotoGP, they are changing the standards where they're not going to have higher CC classes, they're going to have lower CC classes, but the bike's going to be lighter. So will the bike still perform as better? That's hard to tell. But the thing is, at the end of the day, this is what we're looking at, the new era of motorcycle riding. Don't get me wrong, it's cool, it's all right, but it's not necessarily what I prefer, and like I said, one of the things though that this R9 does keep, now I haven't ridden one. Would I like to ride this? Maybe, but you can see what they did is they kind of integrated it with like a touring spec. Again, we go back to the tank positioning. You're looking at the tank, how you're seated, and you're looking at how the handlebars are. The handlebars are up. I don't know if you can tell. They're really high up. You're really seated high up like a touring spec bike. If we go over here to the R1M, we can see it's more so, like I said, everything's locked in. You are down low with the handlebars. Even the seating position, we see how, you can lean up on the tank and put your crotch right up in there and shift the weight left and right, even the seating. So, you are definitely getting a really good comparison here. How the seat is, how your seating position, like you cannot put your crotch up in there. This is, you want to be able to do that and lean the bike. And, and look at this swing arm, I'm not coming after the R9 by any means. I think it's a cool bike. Do I think it's a cool first bike or not? Like I said, it's a good bike. It is. But for what you're looking for, it comes down to that. What are you looking for in riding? And also, too, another thing is we see the headlight design, and they put the headlight in the middle. Actually, DRLs, daytime running headlights, and they put the headlight in the middle, which is, I don't know, do y'all like that or not? When it comes to R1M versus the R9, interesting, right? You take them both, compare, and you see how it is and how they change things. So keep that in mind. And now let's get on down the line. So we got an R7 here. Again, R7 seating position. Handlebars are up higher, just like the R9. So you're looking at more of a touring spec, and look at this. The tank actually, that tank is actually straight down, whereas this tank is a little lean in there. So, they have it so you can kind of lean up on the tank more on this R7. But like I said, the handlebars are higher up, and you can see that compared to the R1M. Is this a good first bike? R7. We'll get into that. And again, you can kind of see the difference in the DRLs there, versus the R7. They kind of changed it up just to make it look different. Now, then we have a beautiful CF Moto. Like I said, nothing at CF Moto. Looks like they did, I don't know if this is necessarily, no, it's not carbon. It's just like a wrap, I think, or plastic that look like carbon. But, yeah, again, also today, they're doing things like cooling the brakes down there. I didn't even notice that. I don't even know what spec this is. This says, what, 450 SS? I mean, I guess it's a special anniversary or something like that. But then we also get into the 500s. And, so what bike is good for you all? And that's one of the questions I'm asked. Should I get a 500? Should I get a, 600, 700, 900, 1000 cc? Well, I tell you this. If you're riding, you need to take your license test. 500s and 400s, the weight sucks. I'm just going to say that. The bikes are not, in my, unless you're really experienced, the bikes are not made to lean for that test, okay? Just give it for what it is. One of the things that you all have to take into account is that just because you buy one of these bikes, you're not going to go 100 miles per hour on this tire. Yeah, you can, but good luck on that. You see how small this tire is? That's what a lot of y'all make that mistake. Y'all think that you can just hop into a 1000 cc bike or a 600 bike and go 100 miles per hour. It doesn't work like that. You need to take into account, speccing out the bike to make sure that it can reach those high speeds in a safe environment, and safe for yourself. But, and then also too, let's check out these. These are the new Suzuki, was a GSX-R 600, the 40th anniversary. These, it's really cool that they went back to the blue and the red and the white, because that's the traditional Suzuki color. Now, of course, they kept the cap, which actually somebody pointed out to me. This reminds you of a cat. Yeah, they kept this headlight. I can't stand this headlight, but the bike is cool. I think, if you were to compare this to the ZX6, it comes down to, I guess, what do you really like at the end of the day? What do you prefer? Now, of course, a lot of people prefer this Gixxers because the Gixxers do sit very low. They're one of the lowest 600s to the ground. And as you can see with the tank is very squared off, The seating position, very narrow, the body style positioning. The handlebars are down low. You're riding in a good position. Also, what I noticed about this bike, they did with the CF Moto we saw. They put these like thick looking carbon plastic pieces in there, which is very interesting. Very interesting. But, the thing is, at the end of the day, what bike? Again, there's just so many choices. And again, we have the GSX 8R, and like I said, we're seeing a transition from this to that. And like I said, you see how high up the handlebars are. Again, you're not going to want to take a driver's test in this bike. That's just, you don't want to. It's just not comfortable leaning, having to do the tight cornering around the cones. You would like a bike like this. Now, granted, a lot of you are scared of the power. A lot of you are scared, you hear people say you're going to kill yourself. You're not going to kill yourself. The thing is that what is very important in any motorcycle, no matter what. And this is why it's so awesome if you grew up as a kid riding dirt bikes to quads and then transitioning to street bikes, because you learn so much how to work the clutch, how to work the back brake, how to shift up, how to work the front brake. Basically, you even riding on different terrain, gravel, dirt, grass, not just riding on asphalt or concrete. You know what you're doing. So take that all into mind when you do pick a bike. You're not on a dirt bike, you're on a street bike. So and again, like I said, even looking at the 600, like I said, a lot of you will say I'll buy the 600, and then you go 100 miles per hour on that tire. That tire is not a super sport tire to go MotoGP track riding. No, you're going to have to change this tire out. Preferably, I actually like the Diablo Super Corsas. They're really nice, comfortable street and off-road tire for the track. But again, like I said, you're going to want to pick it responsibly. Don't just come in and buy a bike and say, oh, I'm going to go do this, Please don't. Then you're going to kill yourself, You try to act like you're some whatever. But at the end of the day, like I said, I think the Gixxer is an awesome first bike. Granted, you're going to drop it, so how can you protect yourself? Well, you can protect yourself by installing frame sliders, and so if you drop the bike, it won't be as much damage. Another thing is why I do prefer the ZX6Rs, because the ZX6Rs to me are a little cheaper. Maybe the Gixxer is a little cheaper, but to replace the fairings, like I said, when we get into these 40th anniversaries, all this fairing and special painting and stuff, they're going to charge you for it. So preferably, I love the ZX6R, because the ZX6R, it's just all one color. You can order it, and it's not going to be on back order. What's going to be on back order are these special pieces with all the details, the stickering, everything. Remember, if you drop and have to replace the fairing, you're going to have to pay maybe an additional for the stickering, on top of the fairing. So just keep that in mind. Also, too, when you're buying your bike. Now, we're going to go check out these ZX6Rs over here, because they're really cool, and like I said, it's one of the best bikes, the best bang for your buck. Really, they are, and they're so beautiful and unique. And like I said, the ZX10s have gone with this design as well, which speaks to what I've been saying all along. You can't beat this futuristic design. It's just so awesome. And like I said, one of the things that you can see even here is that if you were to drop this bike, there's just the one sticker. Everything is just all the same color, and you put the frame sliders on it, and you're good to go. Now, and also too, here we have an e-bike, or e-touring, whatever dirt bike you want to say, which, like I said, this is the future. They really are the future. They're going to be moving forward with the e. How are we going to accept it? Well, we'll just have to wait and see, but I do know they do have a lot of torque, just like the H2, so be prepared when you get on an e-bike. So, with all that being said, let's go back and recap. So, you've basically seen the street bikes here, really awesome lineups here. And like I said, in my opinion, what is the best one? Well, best one is honestly my favorite, is the X6R. Why is that? Well, when you look at high spec out bikes that are limited editions, like this R1M, and like the M1K, although it's not limited, but even Ducatis, you're gonna get high in price, And you all got to remember that, is that if you're going to take one of these specialty bikes, remember to keep 10K in the bank at all times, just to be safe than sorry. And it's not even about riding it hard or anything. It's just that anything can happen. It doesn't even have to be you. And will insurance cover it? Well, that's a fight for your insurance to fight out with the other insurer. Now, again, why I would necessarily not say yes to these Yamahas is because your upright seating position. So if you wanted to get on an R9 or R7, you probably want to be taller. You don't want to be shorter. Now, for all my tall people, granted, have at it, R9, and you can do some work to it, make it nice and quick. And like I said, they've made it lighter, slower, but the lightness, it's a measurement of does lighter and slower horsepower mean better times at the track, or does more power, yeah, it's light but more power at the track. Well, yeah, we know how that ends. But then let's talk about the Busa. So the Busa, honestly, I have not had a problem with the Busa. The Busa is the most amazing bike in the world for reliability, dependability. I love it even more so than my GSX-R 1000 because, that gave me a little problem there. It cut off on me while riding. So the Busa, somebody asked on Instagram the other day about, the maintenance. The maintenance on the Busa is so cheap, honestly. I think I spent $60 in oil changes and doing it myself. And literally, it's very simple. You just literally... Now, for you all, if you buy a stock Busa, it's not going to be as simple. But, you would take off the fairing there, the lower half. Or you can even kind of, reach your hand up in there if there's space. Because mine... all that's taken out in the turbo, so I can reach around that and get the the oil filter out. But yeah, it's very cheap, very reasonable to get a Busa. I have now 5,000 miles on mine, no problems at all. Just got to keep up with the maintenance, chain, tire, and that's it. And is the bike very nimble? Yes, the bike's very nimble. Of course, once you take out those huge exhausts that are very exhausting to have on there, because that is 40 pounds right there, which is crazy. Now, and the thing is, another thing is, let me break this down here. If you're looking at a bike to buy, one of the things that are going to be, sit down, take a pen and paper. You're going to want to do a web chart. You're going to want to say pricing. If pricing isn't an issue for you, then, you're not going to worry about that. But if pricing is an issue, you're going to be looking at a 500 or 400. And granted, look, I understand money can be tight, especially in today's world. And if you need to ride, if you have that urge to ride, then I guess go for 500 or 400, but you're going to outgrow that bike very fast, realize that. And there's not much you can do with it on top of it. And also, too, it doesn't sit as low as you think. So you're going to have to, because remember, the handlebars are up high. There's like a touring. So if you're shorter and just getting into a bike, and this is why I say, don't look at the CC of the bike. You won't really see the CCs of the bike unless you're literally on it, like 1,000 cc. Even the boost you can hop on. You're not going to kill yourself unless you go full throttle and you have no idea what you're doing. But if you're on a little, now granted, you do have to learn the bikes, don't worry, that's true, but at the end of the day, realistically speaking, like I said, if you're budget strapped, I would honestly just keep saving and build your wealth up, invest and build that money up to be able to afford something that you probably won't outgrow as soon, which would be a 600. And again, you're going to get your money's worth out of it, because at the end of the day, you're going to get on it, you're always going to smile, and if you don't, you can always put an exhaust on it, a tune, and do all types of other stuff to it, air filters, I think you could do stacks, everything. So I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, 600s are preferred. Now granted, how does this compare to other brands? Well, other brands, and this is one thing that I was going to talk to you about, is that as you can tell, like I said, we're talking about the differences between the touring versus super sport. And one of the things is that you all realize is that when you go into brands like BMW, when you go to brands like Ducati, one of the best things about BMW is that BMW has an S1K. S1K is best of both worlds because the handlebars are not up as high, but they're kind of like right in the middle, and your seating position is not as aggressive as this, so it kind of allows you that, also heated handlebar grips, your phone integration, everything. And realize that's something very important to discuss right here, because all that stuff does not make a bike, just because phone, that's luxurious stuff. So realize when you're paying for this bike, or any bike, you're paying for what you're getting, at the end of the day. And that's why, you don't need to buy a BMW, you don't need to buy a Ducati. You can simply come in here and buy the 600, buy a ZX6, and you will be just as happy if you just love riding just as I do. You do not need any other thing. And don't get me wrong, I'll show you the rest of the showroom here, and they have an awesome parts, you know, there. But they have the H2, or no, actually no, they must have sold it, because they did have a Kawasaki H2. This is a Polaris, but the Kawasaki one was really sick. But yeah, this is really cool actually. So the Kawasaki one was actually like really similar to this, which was like really cool. How crazy is that? Like they're putting, you know, they're making these, giving them bucket seats, everything, like crazy. And then also too, we got some jet skis here, which I always love jet skis. I think it'd be fun to get on one. I haven't been on one, but I think I'd go crazy on them, especially because now they're coming turbocharged. Like I grew up in an era where if you were to think about turbocharging a jet ski, you're crazy, like out of your mind. But yeah, really cool though. So Sarasota Powersports has so much stuff here to offer, you know, and I love coming here, you know, getting the bike service. I can trust their service always, all the time. Reliable, fashionably on time. Also too, look at the load of e-bikes. I know y'all are crazy on e-bikes, you know, some of y'all out there riding e-bikes. Be careful, because I do know the police are out there for you, especially depending on the CC of the bike. So, oh, and look at this. Yeah, I didn't actually scout this out, but this is a ZX6R. This is the white and gold. Very beautiful, very rare. And like I said, it's one of the best bikes, bang for your buck. Honestly, I just love this bike. And I know one of the local guys here, if y'all follow him on Instagram, his name's Shy. He has a beautiful ZX6R that he's carboned out fully. So, you know, honestly, y'all can do so much with a 600 bike. And like I said, it's cheap. It's way cheaper just to replace the you know, fairings on a ZX6, you know, like I said, the less stick ring and everything. But at the end of the day, y'all, remember, this is all about just enjoying riding. It's not about, you know, limited bikes. It's not about any of that, you know. It's just about enjoying to being able to get out here, ride on 2 wheels, ride on 4 wheels, enjoy that luxury while you have it, you know. So yeah, if you're ever in the Sarasota area, be sure to check out Sarasota Powersports. Like I said, they have an amazing lineup of bikes, quads, dirt bikes, jet skis, as you saw, the e-bikes, everything. Even they have gear checkout. But yeah, one of the hidden gems of Sarasota, honestly. So definitely come down and check that